Hi, everyone. Tonight's opening music features Lottie Blinks by Chicago-based musician Silani Townsend. Thank you for joining us tonight for When Art is Action, Cuando, Arte es Acción, part of the Lit and Loose Festival of Language, Literature, and Arts. I'm Silvia Rivera. The Lit and Loose Festival is proudly produced by Make Literary Productions. This year's Chicago Festival, Remix, Respond, and Rebuild kicked off last night and runs through October 9th as a series of virtual programs. Lit and Loose fosters the creation of new art through international collaboration and essential dialogues between residents of Mexico and the United States. Through conversations and the creation of new art, writers, artists, and musicians participating this fall reconsider past festival themes, while also responding to issues and events currently impacting the US and Mexico. The full lineup of participants and schedule of events are available at litloose.org. The festival would not be possible without our partners, including the National Endowment for the Arts and the Illinois Humanities, as well as the MacArthur Funds for Arts and Culture at the Richard H. Driehaus Foundation, the Gaylord and Dorothy Donnelly Foundation, the Illinois Arts Council Agency, and the generosity of individual supporters. Tonight's event will debut an audio piece by Leslie Hurtado, Chicago-based audio producer, co-creator of the podcast Rabiosa Medina, and journalism student at Northeastern Illinois University. You will then hear from 5 individuals as they reflect on how activism plays a role in their artistic practice and life. The artists include Sandra Cisneros, Kristiana Ray Colón, Brian Herrera, Emi Hernandez, and Ram Dames. This event includes live audio translation in Spanish. Be sure to click on the Zoom link below to listen. And now, let's welcome Leslie Hurtado to introduce her piece.
Hi, everyone. I'm so grateful for you guys tuning in to hear this piece. I know who would have thought that you would be attending an art show virtually. And I know it's a very tough time right now as we are going through a global pandemic. But what I can tell you is, as I spoke to Sandra Cisneros, she said that art is very important right now. And we must use those resources that we have to conjure change in a moment that is so important like any other. And so as you hear this piece, you will hear a collection of responses from activists, writers, poets from the US and Mexico. And I'm very excited to hear what you think. So let's begin. Different things. The one thing at the centerpiece of it all is activism. This is art in action, arte en acción. Let the program begin. Blue house, red house, this year, living in different places, projecting our fears, and then transforming our emotions for our peers who are a part of the younger generation that send hashtags to gain political momentum, like the previous generation that read books like The House on Mongo Street and The Catcher in the Rye. It is the misunderstood from different houses that will fly to find themselves in a place where they can create change. Artist 1, Sandra Cisneros. Artist, author, writer, and activist.
Popular and shy are very conducive to being a writer, because if you're not in the center of attention and if you're not successful and have a lot of friends, the unsuccess of not having popularity or connecting with others or being smart or thinking you're not smart or not being beautiful or thinking you're not beautiful, causes you to be very solitary. And even being in a family with 9 people in a house can make you even more solitary, especially if you're feeling like you were dropped there by elves or something. You have nothing in common with your brothers. So I was a very solitary, sensitive, hypersensitive individual in a very noisy, boisterous, like many Mexican families in Chicago, in small spaces, no privacy, maybe no bedroom, or when you got a bedroom, you couldn't close the door, or maybe you had a room without a door. So there was no space for self-reflection that didn't have radios or televisions going on in the background. And I think all of that contributed to my interior search, an interior world, one where I felt more at home, and at places like the park or the public library, or places that were quiet, or places that uplifted my heart, places that I could be close to nature, the Grant Park or Humboldt Park, or any place that I could climb up and be in a tree or near water. Those were things that nourished me and nourished my art, because of course I was a visual artist before I became a writer, and I'm still a visual artist. When you're an artist, you're an artist. It doesn't matter if you're working with welding materials or words. It's coming from the same place. So I think all of that. I think I was placed in a house that I had to search for my own company. I was forced to search for my own company, and I had to be nourished by things of the spirit. So I think I came into my consciousness and my politics in my 20s. And if you read House of Munger Street properly, you can see it's a young woman in her 20s trying to find her way. She's looking for her route the way that Esperanza is looking for her route. But I had to use an earlier voice in order to be able to speak. I felt very mute. I felt I had no confidence in myself in my 20s. And so I had to take an earlier voice, an earlier neighborhood, and find my way. I had to look at books like Autobiography of Malcolm X. Those kinds of books woke me up to a consciousness that you can see traces of in House on Munger Street, when Esperanza wants to call herself Zizi the X. That's an acknowledgement of Malcolm X and of not wanting to be a slave. So I was searching for my politics as a young student in graduate school, as a young teacher, and as a young counselor. And those years, formative years, 22 to 28, when I wrote House, all of that search was through Esperanza's voice. But really, you will see that she's not looking for a house in the suburbs. She's looking for a space of her own, a creative house, a spiritual house, a home in the heart. And I didn't feel at home in my father's house, even though I had a very loving father, and my mother was very encouraging. But I needed more privacy and more quiet to be creative. And I always felt, like I didn't belong in Chicago. I felt I needed more. And my father was very connected to his family in Mexico City, so those forays that we took to visit Mexico were very important to me. And to me, without being aware of it, I was gaining an admiration and appreciation for my culture without even ever stepping into a museum. I just felt this connection to nature in Mexico to nourish me. So now I understand the house as the house of the spirit. And it's not necessary for me to go somewhere. Like some people have a bucket list. Oh, I want to go to Kathmandu. Oh, I got to see the Aurora Borealis before I die. But for me, my bucket list is to visit those spiritual places in me. So I don't have to go anywhere. That home in the heart is inside me. And I need to do the spirit work, meditating or reading essays by people I admire. Thich Nhat Hanh or Pema Chodron or Nelson Mandela, all the heroes that can teach me something at this phase in my life. I need to journey there. And I need to do that house cleaning at home, reading, changing, transforming myself, creating, and healing and becoming a better human being. And I don't need to go to Kathmandu. I don't need to meet the Dalai Lama. It's the home in the heart. It's within me. And for me, this is a time of creating. So whatever your genre is of creating, whether it's creating a garden or creating a song, art is very nourishing. And we need to use this time, which, to me is a godsend, to retreat and not have to leave my house and do lectures, but to be able to write, which is why I was put on this planet, without interruption, is to me like a sanctuary. It's retreat. It's a time of retreat, of healing and transformation. I think one of the things I learned when I was writing House on Mango Street and tried to communicate to my readers is about activism. So I'm very proud of the activism of the young people. And by the same token, I'm also very ashamed at people who are working from some place of rage without using that rage wisely. I think rage impels us to do, and I love that the young people are doing things, but I also am very careful to harness my rage so that I do positive and not inflammatory. I try not to use inflammatory language or to make situations worse than they already are, because I'm a Buddhist, and I'm very much concerned about transforming rage to right action and peaceful action. So I admire the activism that's going on. It reminds me of when we were young, and it reminds me of the 60s. And I can't say how I'm so proud of the activists, but I'm always afraid that we have a void of a leader, a spirit leader, a spiritual leader. In these times, there's a vacuum of leadership, and that's dangerous. So when people are angry, it incites more violence, and I'm frightened when I look at how people in positions of power are adding fuel to that rage. It hurts me to see the destruction of lives. It hurts me to see the vitriol of the discussions. And I fear for what's coming up ahead, that things are going to become worse before they become better, because we don't have a leader guiding us in a wise way. So that's my fear. I also don't see that the young people are composting their rage into illumination. A lot of it is like, it's really easy with social media to just say things. And, everybody's working from a very wounded place. I don't deny that wounded place that we all are in as a society. But I do feel that there's wise ways to transform that rage to positive action. And I hope that people are going to take their rage and go out there and get people to register to vote. I hope people are going to do something positive with their rage and not add more violence in words or actions out there, because we already have a very violent situation. I hope people are going to do something positive with their rage, and maybe they're going to fill that void of being the leader that we don't have. Maybe they're going to work towards becoming that leader. I hope so. I think we need art. Everybody needs to be an artist right now. That doesn't mean you are going to become a professional artist, but we all need art, because art is what allows us to heal, and allows us to walk towards light. It allows us to understand ourselves and to have clarity about situations. And I think things sometimes, we get very frustrated. I know I lose my temper more often now during the pandemic, and I lose my patience. But art is what allows us to move towards hope.
Can't run from a gun, can't hide from a lie, but we can still have good times. Ain't got no dress code, got no stress, no, we ain't gonna stand in line. If you're alive, then sing. We got everything, you're all you got to bring. We got everything. Can't run from a gun, can't hide from a lie, but we can still have good times. Ain't got no dress code, got no stress, no, we ain't gonna stand in line. If you're alive, then sing. We got everything, you're all you got to bring. We got everything, if you're alive, then sing.
Artist number 2, Kristiana Ray Colón, poet, playwright, writer, and activist.
A writer, primarily a playwright up until this point, but I'm starting to make my transition into writing for screen, film, and television. I'm also the co-founder of the Let Us Breathe Collective, which is an alliance of artists and activists organizing through a creative lens to imagine a world without prisons and police. We came together organically in 2014 after the death of Mike Brown. Me and my brother and a group of other artists from Chicago felt really compelled to respond to the uprising that was happening in Ferguson. And we raised money to bring supplies to protesters. And it began what we did not know then was going to be a life-changing shift toward the fight for abolition, the abolition of police and prisons and carceral systems of punishment. And so we went to Ferguson not really considering ourselves activists or organizers, just artists with a lot of passion and enough of a platform that we felt it was our responsibility to leverage our privilege and our access to institutions and resources to lend them to the people who were on the ground and on the front line. But we ended up meeting a remarkable group of people called the Lost Voices, which is another group that organically came together and were camping out in the protest zone. And so they occupied the intersection where Mike Brown was walking when he was pursued and murdered by Darren Wilson. They occupied that space for 47 days. They intended to occupy it until Darren Wilson was indicted. And they occupied that space until they were forcibly removed. And we were so inspired by this group of disenfranchised young people who came together out of outrage to put their bodies on the line in this way that, you know, what we thought was going to be a one weekend trip to Ferguson to drop off supplies turned into an ongoing relationship. And so we came back the following weekend and the following weekend, and we continued to build relationships with these protesters in Ferguson and build art in collaboration with them. So we produced a documentary film, and then we went on to produce a piece of live documentary theater that we toured around Chicago and the Midwest. And, you know, it was really our mission at that point just to use our access to artistic platforms and institutional resources to help get the story of what was actually happening on the ground out into the world, because we saw that lacking in mainstream media. And that really snowballed into us leading our own direct actions in Chicago. And that was the genesis of what has become the Let Us Breathe Collective. And so we have been using art, performance, and creativity to really take the fight for dismantling violent systems of policing to the level of actually providing the resources, creating the programs that we think are the blueprint for what actually keeps communities safe, because we know that people with guns who are able to kill with impunity is not what keeps Black and brown communities safe. So that has been kind of my life's work for the past 6 years. And, the formation of the Let Us Breathe Collective, that experience in Ferguson really shifted my creative work. So I've always been a writer. I've been writing since I could pretty much hold a pencil. I've been writing creatively. I had my first poem published when I was 6 years old. I used to write plays for my teddy bears and, have them act them out. So that creative spark has kind of always been in me. But in 2014, I really shifted toward understanding that it was my responsibility to create an abolitionist canon of drama and media, because there's so much propaganda in the world that convinces us that policing is the only way to deal with harm. And I think that's a real paucity of imagination, and that people really just need to be catalyzed to imagine alternate realities and alternate possibilities. Policing as we know it has not always been the thing, and it doesn't have to always be the thing. And sometimes it really just takes a shift in the imagination for people to consider something else. I know that that's what it took for me. I'd been to a lot of protests before I made the cognitive leap from indict Darren Wilson to no, we don't want to indict Darren Wilson because carceral justice is actually not enough in this moment. We need to dismantle the system altogether because it's not just about a few bad apples. The system at its core has always been violent and has always hunted and killed and exploited the bodies and the labor of Black and brown people. And it cannot be reformed into something less violent. And so I am starting to expand into film and television. So the piece that I worked on for the Lit Illuze Festival was a piece called Suspension. And I collaborated with an artist from Mexico City who built some really beautiful video projections to accompany a reading of an excerpt of this play that was performed at the Museum of Contemporary Art. And the play Suspension is an Afrofuturist dystopian high school rebellion play that imagines a high school climb and succeed academy where, unbeknownst to parents who sort of just click accept on an update through the school's mobile app, agree to this dystopian new disciplinary code that includes, an increase in security marshals patrolling the hallways in riot gear and armed with tasers that are benignly called success savers because they allegedly deliver a mood and cognition boosting charge to non-compliant students. The rollout of Panoptica, which is an artificial intelligence public announcement system. So imagine that Siri takes over the PA system at school and is able to spy on the students and sort of automatically administer disciplinary infractions. And then, most horrifically, success inversion therapy that takes in-school suspension literally. And so students are suspended upside down from the ceiling in detention. And so the play imagines 5 teenagers on the power cheer team coming together to find their missing classmate and rebel against this oppressive disciplinary regime in their high school campus. And that's kind of the thing that I'm pitching to networks and studios and hoping to get picked up and developed, to both show the grotesque possibilities that we could arrive at if we continue on the path that we're on in terms of policing in schools. In 2014, 2015, as I was starting to get involved in activism, was that, what we understand as the abolition of slavery was conditional. The 13th Amendment that allegedly abolished slavery says that slavery is illegal except as punishment for a crime. Which, if you then look at the decades that follow, you see that America has bent over backwards to develop a penal code that is incredibly unjust and that targets Black and brown people, and that criminalizes the behavior, just like the lives of Black and brown people in America. Literally, the police system that we have now is a descendant of militias being empowered to hunt fugitive slaves and return them to their plantations. And I think that is the part where art is really vital, because art gives us the tools for imagination and for speculating on what could be different, what could be possible, and literally constructing alternate realities. Tony Cade Bombara says that it is the artist's job to make the revolution irresistible. People are not going to fight if there's not some pleasure inside of movement work. And I think that is the role of art. I think there has to be music, and there has to be dance, and there has to be performance. And I think that's really why Black Lives Matter exploded in the way that it did in 2014, because it wasn't the same old, six chants of protests past. We really saw young people taking to the streets and bringing a hip hop sensibility to the front line and innovating the chants and the rhythms in a way that was intoxicating, that made people want to come outside, that made people stay outside overnight. In the case of the Lost Voices, camp outside for 47 days. And, while they were out there around the campfire, they're freestyling and making up, chants that are also rap songs, And so that, I think, is what is special about this moment of uprising, is that the youth are really infusing it with a sense of musicality and creativity that is special, and that I think has the creative potential to really shift culture.
La vida mía, this life of mine, where children come to America and leave everything behind. Their families, food, love. The real struggle in America is to exist, but the finger resists to only see a valley of thumbs. But la vida mía, this life of mine, has just begun. Artist 3, Brian Herrera, artist and activist.
I'm an artist, specifically illustrator and graphic designer. Originally born in Veracruz, Mexico. Came to the U.S. when I was 11, to Chicago. A lot of my work explores a lot of the intersectionality of immigrant identity and queer culture. And I do this through different mediums. Illustration and design are the main mediums that I use. Also using design to highlight a lot of the marginalized communities that I work with. I started taking art seriously 4 or 5 years ago, a little bit right after high school. I wanted to pursue it as a career. Unfortunately, I didn't have the funds to go to an actual institution. So all of it has been self-taught, a lot of trial and errors. When it came to me using art in combination with activism was when I realized that what I'm learning is an actual tool. For example, the programs that I was learning to use graphic design were tools that I was teaching myself to put into practice. So I found those tools really useful. Kind of use those tools to sort of elevate the community. One of the first times that my art was specifically used as an illustrator, as a residency illustrator, specifically for journalism. and a way to be used to tell stories. So journalism is something that I've always wanted to get into, but I never really found a way to sort of blend that in with illustration and graphic design. So this was such a great opportunity to put that into practice and really hone into my identity and the things that I support. For example, the illustrations that we were working with were specific recent stories of people that crossed the border due to either COVID or just the necessity of it. I guess crossing borders is a direct response to the lack of publications curated by and for documented immigrant artists. And it is also the first magazine of its kind to showcase the experience of sort of the contemporary undocumented artist experience. And what I'm shooting for it to do is to provide a better understanding of ourselves as peers, but also as those outside of our community. And then there's this play of words with crossing borders where, you know, when you think of crossing borders, you think of like the physical act of crossing borders. It's kind of like a play of words where it does go beyond crossing fences, walls, or rivers. It explores the metaphysical borders of the emotional and mental turmoil that, you know, which is the reality that a lot of immigrant artists face in this country. I think art and activism really have gone hand in hand throughout history, but specifically now it's super important because we are living in an era where we are truly depending on our phone screens and we're truly depending on a digital platform. And this is one of those things that a lot of the times, the reasons why a lot of the times political movements or social movements die, because there is really not enough content to support that through art for a lot of social movements to bring awareness. I truly do believe that artists are in the front line when it comes to a lot of these social movements, even though they're not always in the physical front line of the protest. Their art is in the front line, and that is super important, super crucial, and it really does stand out to me when that artist directly, it's directly affected by whatever they're trying to talk about.
El policía te mató, el gobierno dice no, el presidente dice no, pero las rosas se levantan en protesta. Almo, almo, ¿por qué no contestas? Artist 4, Emmy Hernandez, Mexican artist and activist. My name is Emma del Rosario Hernandez Pineda, and I'm from the state of Guerrero in Mexico. And I make a kind of art. I like to mix the digital with traditional. My favorite illustration that I've done is an illustration that says Viva Mexico, and it has these flags and 4 people that are Mexican. The first character is a man who dedicates his time to washing cars, and the second one is a student who has a mariachi hat. The third one is a woman wearing traditional Mexican clothing. The fourth one is an elderly woman wearing an apron, which represents the women who make quesadillas in the street. I wanted to put all of these people together to show that Mexico is a diverse country, not only in colors or in skin tones, but also that there are existing jobs and that everyone deserves respect. What I intend to do is to mix the social themes with other themes. People are not always consuming things that are sad. They also find ways to entertain themselves. The main message that I want to send is that Despite the difficult times, it's important that we stay motivated and that we become more human. It is important that we stay sympathetic and raise our voices when we see injustices occur. Currently, the major problem in Mexico is the machismo and the femicides. The most recent femicide that happened was with a woman that was named Jessica Gonzalez. It was an injustice, and that is what's happening more often. It was a femicide that committed. It appeared to me that is why we are fighting every day for all the girls that have been treated violently. It's about a woman in Morelia in the state of Michoacán. She was 21 years old, and it was reported that she disappeared in the 21st of September. We found her with signs of violence, and what we want is that they demand the alleged person to be held guilty and to present himself and to give his statement. Now I think they haven't found him. I like to mix themes of art because this way we can reach to people and they can feel sympathy in a more accessible way, and that they can see illustrations of the victims and they can feel and ask themselves, what would happen if this person was my uncle or my sister? So I believe that there's this closeness, this connection that the person can feel when they see this illustration, and so they identify themselves and demand justice and respect. At one point, police can feel untouchable, and perhaps they say, oh, I'm a police and I can do whatever I want and nothing's going to happen because I am the law. I feel like that's a mentality that some have, and it's incorrect. It's something that they have to correct, because not just because you're in a high public office that you have the right to harm others. I believe it's something that police have to work on in terms of being reasonable. And also, they should also demand justice themselves, not just because they're police that nothing will happen to them. On the contrary, they should be giving the example. Being an artist in these times are important because we can convey a message of how we feel, and other people could probably feel the same. I think that's very powerful. Viendo la pared en este estado, un cuarto donde puede uno ser o parecer. Este es un camino de Belén. Ya me voy. Artist 5, Ram Tamez, Mexican artist and activist. My full name is long. It's Jose Ramiro Tamez Valdez, and everyone knows me as Ram Tamez. Currently, I live in Paris, France, and I was born in Monterrey, Mexico, up the river. I think that when we're all young, we all draw. Rather, for me, I never stopped, so it became a constant phenomenon in my life. And in teenage years, and more later in my life, I came to France in 2 years. I came to France thanks to a scholarship that was created by Guillermo del Toro, and he did this in Mexico. I was fortunate to receive the scholarship, and so I attended Gobelin in animation school. Being a Mexican, a lot of times you're going to talk about things that surround you. And when I lived in Mexico and all of the things happening in Mexico, politically speaking, these things affect you. It then falls into your art. For example, now the poetry that I made is bound to that. It's close to the train that loads people to the south of Mexico, to the north of Mexico, and migrants come in the train who want to go to the US. And really, in the short film that I made, basically this train that carries political things that happen in real life. This is your reality. And in that moment, I used to think, how could I continue my artistic career? And well, looking back, being here, I can tell you that it's very difficult in many places, but staying in Mexico, there wasn't a lot of things that I could do to scratch my way up. Speaking of politics, there's not a lot of support, like in comparison to France. There's a lot of examples that I could give you, but most of the people that go to see movies in France, a percentage of ticket sales goes towards the production crew of the movie. In France, in Mexico, you don't have that. Guillermo del Toro asked me something that was very curious, and I think it's very Mexican. He asked me, what would happen if you didn't have this scholarship? How would your tomorrow be? I told him, the same as here, to keep trying. Thank you for listening to Arte en Acción, Art in Action.
Thank you for joining us tonight for When Art is Action, Cuando Arte es Acción, part of the Lit and Loose Festival of Language, Literature, and Art. I'm Silvia Rivera, and you just heard a fabulous audio piece produced by Leslie Hurtado. She interviewed 5 artists, and they reflected on how activism plays a role in their artistic practice and life. And wow, Leslie, I'm really inspired. What a great way to head into this new week. And I want to ask you about these interviews. But first, I want to back up a little bit and just, I think that we just heard from, artists of just various genres, and I consider audio to also be an art. And I think that it has the power to move people, to inspire people. And what I really want to start off by knowing is how you decided to become an artist yourself in this very intimate art form known as audio storytelling.
Sylvia, thank you for asking that. At a very young age, I was involved in the performing arts instead of journalism. And at a young age, I used to sing with my father. I used to be involved in theater. And I used to hang out with my friends who used to do art, like murals. And I was a part of that process. But I think as I started writing, I realized that what you write is also a form of art. And there's so many different forms of art, and there are different ways to convey messages that spread change. And I think that's how this piece really drew my attention, because I wanted to see how I could make audio a more immersive experience for the listeners, that were hearing the piece right now. And in audio, you're able to create a reality. You're not seeing images, you're creating those images yourself. And as Kristiana said, that sometimes you have to envision that reality yourself as an artist in order to start being involved in political movements, like the work that she has done with Let Us Breathe Collective. I think it's amazing, the work that she has done. So I really wanted to highlight the different ways that these individuals create a change in their own way, whether it's by writing, whether it's by writing a book or creating art, whatever it is, they were able to make that possible. And many are inspired by their works of art.
Thank you for sharing that, Leslie. You and I had a chance to have a conversation earlier and share, I guess, all of the things that we had in common, right? In the sense of, our parents being immigrants from Mexico, being first generation college students, and in many ways, just going through life, experiencing and understanding that a lot of our stories aren't represented in media. And that is also true in audio storytelling. How important is it for you to capture the stories that you and I, even earlier today, shared with one another? That it requires sometimes a lot of effort on our end because there isn't anybody sort of guiding us, and saying, hey, this is the path, but we're in a position to sort of figure it out. How has this motivated, I guess, your own journey and your own path?
I guess when I started writing, I realized I wanted to do something that could inspire others and that could help others. In many places, there are news deserts that I said earlier to you today. And it's very true. And I think it's important to highlight issues in different parts of Chicago and outside Chicago and around the world. There are also global issues that have not been mentioned in the media. And a lot of our parents are confused. They watch Spanish television, and sometimes there's a line that's blurred, and you can tell what is real and what is not real. And I think when you're in that moment and when you're out there and you're seeing what's happening, it's very important to document those issues, because if you don't, our parents will never see the problems that are existing. And so I think that's very important, and it's something that I want to continue. And as I did this piece, I thought it was important to show the different ways that people respond to change, respond to movements in their countries. And it's just so inspiring hearing people from Mexico like Emmy, who talked about the femicides in Mexico and how many women have been murdered over there, and no one's being held accountable. And so I think it's very important to talk about these things and show different movements and have people talking about different things and spark conversation in the living room or wherever we are.
You definitely have captured important voices and just important testaments to this moment in time that we're living in. What surprised you, I guess, the most from the stories that you heard? What are you walking away with feeling like you learned from these individuals?
I learned that everyone deals with these issues in a different way, and that they have different ways of creating art as well. So when they combine both of those things, art and activism, it's very different. It's not the same thing. And especially because these individuals are from different places and they have different professions. And I just thought that was incredible, hearing all these individuals have different takes on what's happening, on the pandemic, on movements that are occurring, and how to deal with those movements. Like Sandra said, we have to channel that rage in a different way. And Kristiana, who said we have to abolish the system completely. And then you have Emmy from Mexico, who's talking about the femicides that are occurring. And then you have the last artist who said you have to branch out of Mexico and learn how to become successful that way, and you have to keep working hard. So very different responses that I heard today. And as I was hearing it yesterday, and so, yeah, that was so incredible to me to hear all of these things. And that's exactly what I wanted for this piece, to have a diverse group of individuals from the US and Mexico talking about this important moment in history. And so, yeah, that's what I wanted to show in this piece.
I was talking to you earlier about how, in many ways, as a producer, as a storyteller, you want to impact your audience when they're listening to these stories. You want them to walk away with something and to, again, feel inspired to go vote, to go, try to change the world in their own way. I also feel I had the experience that you have had, in that I've been able to reach out to folks and interview them, for conversations like the one that you had. And while the audience also benefits, I feel that I've also benefited as a person, and that I've also been able to take these gems, and it has informed my own journey as a professional and as a person. What do you feel that you have walked away with in taking these conversations and having them inspire your own sort of professional path and personal path as well?
Yes, I think it's an ongoing journey, and I have a lot to learn about Mexico and the US and the problems that are existing. Um, and I definitely want to research more and go out there and be in the midst of conflict. I think a lot of people are scared of doing that, and they don't want to be harmed. They don't want to risk their safety and their voice. But I think we have to be that voice right now. We have to go out there and we have to report on these issues. And so as I absorbed everything from this piece, I realized I really have to go out there and I have to find out what is really happening in Mexico, and what is really happening in the US. I want to learn more about the government. I want to learn more about law. I want to learn about policies, and I want to learn about how can I get someone to speak confidently on these issues to me and to tell me what's really going on. And so that's what I walked away with, and I want to continue this path, and speaking to more individuals that know more than me. And so I can gain a better sense of understanding and I can share that within my community.
Well, I personally am really excited about your future and just your tenacity and your ingenuity in thinking, I'm going to start a podcast. And you started Rabiosa Medina because you were like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We have all of these social uprisings happening. We need to create a space where we can just connect on these issues and really break them down for people like me to be able to connect and understand them and explore the world around us during this time. So I would love to know, I guess, 10 years from now, when you look back at this moment in time, what type of world do you envision for yourself, and what type of impact would you like your work to have on others?
Yeah, I envision my future as continuing this path, in the journalism realm, the realm of journalism, and meeting individuals from countries that I've never been to, and just learning about the problems over there. I think I have a strong interest for global issues, and I want to learn how I can get that story. And in the future, I would love to report outside the US and to continue interviewing people from those countries. And just to get a better understanding and be a better person and a better reporter. I think we also have to learn kindness in moments like this. We have to understand individuals that are outside the US and in within the US, and ask them, how are you feeling today? And what is happening in your country? And there has to be this uh, you have to make the person feel comfortable. And it starts there. It starts with kindness. It starts with making a change. It's putting your foot out in the door and visiting these places and gaining trust from these individuals to make impactful stories. So that's where I see myself in the future, to continue doing this and to continue interviewing as much people as possible so I can be who I want to be and share that with others.
That's so wonderful, Leslie. We have a question from the audience. Camila Foreman is asking, this is such a diverse set of artists presented. How did you choose them?
How did I choose them? Well, the two that I interviewed was Sandra Cisneros and Kristiana Colón, two people that I admire so much. And I thought, you know what? I want to know how they feel about the movements that are happening right now. And hearing Sandra, it was a very different response to Kristiana's. And I think that's so interesting how everyone has a different response to this moment. And when I heard Sandra, it was just so calming. Same thing with Kristiana, and channeling our rage, as Kristiana said, we have to do something. And I thought it was incredible. And the other three that I picked, one was Brian Herrera. He is a queer, undocumented artist, and he has a lot to say on these movements, and he's been personally affected by a lot of political issues, and he shows that in his art. So I wanted to reach out to him, and he's done amazing things. He has a magazine that centers undocumented queer youth and people of color. So I wanted to highlight him, and the other two artists are from Mexico, and they have done work where their digital art has a message that is so strong. And most of the time, when I was looking through their pages, I noticed that the fourth artist, who's Emmy Hernandez, she has like artworks where she puts justice for Jessica, as mentioned in the audio piece, who was murdered due to a femicide that occurred in Mexico by a man who is now charged. And so she put that art piece, and it gained a lot of attention, and it gained my attention. So I thought, I want to include her because she is talking about these things, and she's being brave to speak on it, and she's protesting out there in Mexico, and she's speaking about the killings that are happening in Morelia, Mexico. And it's just so important to highlight these people. Yeah, I picked them because I saw what they were posting, and it was so important to me.
I think Kristiana said something along the lines of, arts is basically the response to when mainstream media, doesn't tell our stories. And so I think that it is just so important to have the arts as this platform of expression to, speak truth to power and to, highlight all of those stories that unfortunately don't always get told. So I definitely want to thank you, Leslie, for highlighting everybody, for doing such a wonderful job of just curating a powerful array of voices and including your own voice. I think that you are going to blaze a trail, and you have a bright star and a bright future. So I'm excited to follow your career and wish you all of the success.
Thank you so much, Silvia, and I really appreciate joining you in this conversation. You're amazing, and I love the work that you did with Vocalo, so thank you so much.
Thank you. And I want to thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Leslie, for producing tonight's piece, along with all of the participating artists. We have events every day this week, so please check the schedule on litloose.org and register today. Definitely don't miss out on our finale, the Lit and Loose live show on Friday, October 9th at 7 p.m. It's hosted by poets Jose Olivares and Jimena Gonzalez and features collaborative work from nearly 24 Lit and Loose alums. All of this year's programming is free to enjoy. If you'd like to show your support with a donation, the link to give is below. Thank you, everyone, and have a great week.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.